So I don't know. I think maybe I would like to work on this side because left side. Can't see what I'm doing, but the left side because this is already in terms of sines and cosines. So maybe there's some stuff we can do here, and maybe that'll transform it to this side. So let's start with the left-hand side. So we're going to write everything in terms of sines and cosines first. So that will be cosine alpha, sine alpha. And then we're going to clear the fractions. So the LCD of all the fractions would be sine alpha. So we're going to multiply numerator, denominator by that. So when we do that, we're going to get cosine alpha minus 1 on the numerator. And in the denominator, we're going to get cosine alpha plus 1. Right? All the sines are going to cancel. Sine cancel, cosine alpha minus 1. For the denominator, sines will cancel, cosine alpha plus 1. All right, now let's take a peek back at what we're trying to prove. So that's the one we're trying to prove on the right side. So do you think there's a way to get from where we're at to where we need to be? Kind of maybe incorporate the Pythagorean, maybe? How can we get to a Pythagorean identity with what we have? Supplied by, I'm not quite clear, I can't hear it 100%, but I think, recall that if I want to somehow get to a Pythagorean identity, this is what 6 was about, right? And that was multiplying by the conjugate of one of those, right? Because multiplying by the conjugate will give us the difference of squares, 1 minus sine squared, 1 minus cosine squared, and then we can replace that with, this was the other thing that was important up here, was that all those Pythagoreans can be rewritten, right, to solve for a trig function. So in the one that we are proving, right, so here if I want to look at the denominator of this one, sine squared. It's negative sine squared, but we can work around that. There's ways around that. But for now, how can I get the sine squared? Well, I can get sine squared if I multiply by the conjugate of this, right? Okay, let's do that. So cosine alpha minus 1. It's supposed to be an alpha. All right. So why did we do that? Because we want sine squared in the denominator here. So I think it actually works out to negative what we actually want. So in the numerator, it's going to be cosine alpha minus 1 times cosine alpha minus 1. We can FOIL that out, right? If we FOIL that out, we're going to get cosine squared, or cosine alpha squared, and then negative cosine alpha, and then another negative cosine alpha, that's going to be negative 2 cosine alpha, and then negative 1 times negative 1, positive 1. In the denominator, that we're going to get cosine alpha squared minus 1 after you FOIL that, right? So we get cosine alpha squared, a negative cosine alpha, a positive cosine alpha, those cancel, and then a negative 1. Now let's double check. Let's make sure, is that going to help us at all? At least the numerators match. I mean, they're in a different order, but they match, right? It's encouraging. Now we just need to rewrite this. Okay. Now this is not, we know that cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. So what is cosine squared alpha minus 1? Negative sine squared, right? So if we just rewrite this, we subtract the 1 over, and then subtract the sine squared over, we get this. Is it like sitting in the front row of the movie theater where you're like, yeah. So now substitute, and then we're done. So in the numerator we have cosine squared alpha minus 2 cosine alpha plus 1, and then replacing the denominator with negative sine squared alpha. That's it. That's the right-hand side. It didn't seem so bad because I'm leading you through it, but if you're trying to figure it out, you know, it's going to take a little bit of practice to recognize some of these things. And don't be afraid to work with both sides. If you really have to, what you probably, let's say you got stuck here, right? Let's say you got stuck at this step. And what you could do on this side is you can factor this. You can factor that, and that will factor as this. And then sine squared, you can replace that with 1 minus cosine squared, and then put in the negative. So there's different things you can try. I know a lot of these are not going to be obvious right away, but it's just a matter of just practicing and exposing yourself to these problems.